In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this very fast crib quilt. This crib quilt has been on my to-do list for at least 2 months. So for what better motivation than to have you guys watch me do it. So this is another one of my scrap buster quilts, and I have all of these 5-inch squares. So the intent is to do it to the size of a crib quilt, which measures in at 36 inches by 52 inches. So I basically cut one of those 5-inch squares in half, which then gives us obviously a 2.5-inch rectangle. Then after that, I sew them both together, making sure I've got 2 contrasting ones. So I've got a lime green and a pink, and I do it with a 1/4 inch seam. And then I trim them squares down, so I make sure I have a 4.5-inch square. So what I'm going to do here is start chain piecing everybody through. This is going to be super quick and easy. So the idea with chain piecing is that you just get everybody all lined up and ready to go through, and it just keeps it all moving, even though I'm being finicky. I'm trying not to overthink this. I'm going to put my pivot key on, so it just raises my presser foot every time, and I don't have to lift it up and down. And just put my next one through. And just make sure I line everything up and push this next one through. So I'm just going to keep chain piecing all of these pieces through. I didn't have this one ready. Here we go. So you get the idea. So I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll meet you back here when I have them all done. One of the most time-consuming parts of this quilt is just squaring it up to that 4.5 inches. So that the end block is going to be 4.5 inches squared. So I'm just going to cut this part off here. And the other time-consuming part is just making sure that nothing similar is touching on the blocks as you're working them across. As you can see, I have this first row attached, and I am just putting these ones next to them so I can see that there's nothing like similar next to each other, and then just attaching that. So I'm basically quilting it as I go along. Now, I did say I was going to do this quilt 36 inches across, but it's going to be a little longer. It's going to be about 41 inches because I just don't want to cut into any of these blocks. When I'm joining my first 2 rows together, I am just going to pin my seams together so I don't lose that seam, because I kind of want it to be kind of perfect, but I'm not aiming for perfect. And as you come to that seam, just take that pin out and just continue on. So as you're going through, just make sure that them seams for the squares are actually meeting up as you're sewing. When you're working with some of your scrap fabrics, if there isn't an actual print on the fabric, then you're probably going to be cutting some of those pieces on the bias. And one thing to bear in mind when it's going through the sewing machine, just make sure that you're not stretching anything as it's going through, and hopefully it will just lie flat and it won't stretch even more. Okay, so this is the finished quilt top, and if you were to do exactly like I did, your width would end up being around about 41 inches. Now my cat thinks he's playing. And if you were to do it the same length as me, it would measure in at about... You're going to stop playing. About 51. It's actually 52, but my cat liked to play with the end, as you could see. So remember that we started with 5-inch blocks. Then we cut them into halves and we made the block size 4.5 inches. The one thing I do recommend is, if you are doing it from scraps, that you use a variety of different scraps, because it's very easy to have one repeat all the time. So just make sure you have a really good variety. It really does make a very fast and easy quilt. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to create a quilt sandwich. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss seeing me next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. So this is another one of my scrap buster When you're working with your scrap fabric, there's a high possibility that you're going to be cutting some of those pieces on the bias. You're going to... So the next thing I do is basically cut a 5-inch square in half, so you've got like 2.5 inch... I can't speak!